Natural selection, we're only talking about elimination. We're not talking about creating anything new. Natural selection can only eliminate. So the problem is not what you eliminate, because that happens all the time. We are concerned with, evolutionists are concerned, and we're concerned with looking at this as the origin of cells, the origin of life. And the source that they propose is mutations. The problem with this, and I know because I worked in the medical school with mutations, the problem with this is the vast majority of mutations are deleterious, or what they call near neutral. Near neutral means that they only contribute a small amount to the problem, but they add up. Kind of like when I did marriage counseling, I found most divorces were a result. I got licensed as a therapist and worked for Arlington Psychological Associates. And in working there, you work with a lot of couples who are having a hard time. And I found most couples did not divorce over major things. The problem was a lot of little things that added up. So what's the problem? Well, my husband, he's sloppy. He comes home from work, he smells of work, he stinks. That bothers me. He squeezed the toothpaste in the center instead of the end, and they would go through all this litany of problems, and they would admit it's not one thing, it's a whole bunch of things. Well, that's what near-neutral mutations are. They eventually lead to breakdown of the cell, causing death. So they're not, by themselves, they're not a problem, but they add up. And that's the problem. That's well known. That's what we worked with. In working with mutations, what we're concerned with is once a mutation occurs, how do you deal with it? And there's about 5,000 different diseases that are caused by mutations. And when you talk about beneficial mutations, you get a blank stare. They don't exist. Or if they exist, and I have a whole lecture on this, so I won't repeat it, but if they exist, they're minor things which don't really make much difference. So the vast majority of mutations are deleterious or lethal or near neutral. And Ernst Mayr, because when I say this, people say, oh, no, that couldn't be right. But it is. And so I quote two well-known scientists. Ernst Mayr said, ultimately, all variation is due to mutation. And Theodoros Dobzhansky, a Russian scientist, by the way, he was German. And although he ended up teaching at Harvard in his last 40 years, he was an ornithologist, Ernst Mayr was, and taught at Harvard. And Theodoros Dobzhansky taught at the University of not Chicago, but of Columbia University. I'll get it. And he said mutation is the only source of the raw materials and hence of evolution. So they really believe that you are the result of billions of mistakes. And if you think about it, look at maybe you better not do this, but look at your spouse and say, you're the result of billions of mistakes. I mean, that if you think about it, that's ludicrous. I made a few mistakes in my life, and it's hard for me to think of one that was really beneficial. Some I managed to deal with, but I'm hoping that somebody else would make a mistake and write me a check instead of 100,000. But that's never happened. I've heard stories of mistakes that people made that benefited somebody, but that's not me. And then to illustrate the importance of this, when this discovery was made, and I talk about, well, the article talks about the person who did that, basically he discovered if you put fruit flies in a petri dish in an x-ray machine and turn it on, you get a lot of very strange fruit flies. You get mutations, and they end up with no head, 2 heads, 2 wings, and plus a small wing, 4 wings, lots of variations. And they said from this that this is a way we can actually speed up evolution. Herman J. Muller, by the way, who came up with this, who was a well-known scientist, he ended up here at the University of Texas, by the way, and he did his work here. He got the Nobel Prize for this discovery because the feeling was we can actually speed up evolution. So we take you gals who are pregnant, we put you in an x-ray machine, turn it on, zap the embryo, and we'll come out with an Einstein or a super athlete. Well, you know what's going to happen. You know when you gals have been to a doctor's and they do x-rays, they try to protect your body because x-rays we know cause mutations, which causes cancer, period. And we know that if we x-ray your child, probably it's not going to be good. In fact, an experiment was done to determine indeed whether mutations could be beneficial. In Russia, they couldn't do that here. They had a bunch of pregnant women line up. They blew up an atomic bomb. They protected their eyes. They weren't trying to hurt them. They just want to see what happens to the children that they were carrying as a result of the radiation from the bomb. And they ended up then delivering those babies, and they have a whole museum of the ones that survived. Most didn't survive. They had a whole museum of the babies, which is online, and these were babies without legs, without arms, severely retarded, and they were a number of interesting things, which is why I got on there in the first place. Your eyes begin at the side of your head, and they move forward. Well, what happens when you have a mutation is, certain mutations, the brakes don't work, and the eyes coalesce, and you have an eye in the middle. And they have several of those online, which were from this experiment, and they concluded that there was not one single case where there was any beneficial changes that they could detect. They were all negative. And so from that research and other research, we realized that mutations are not our friend. But yet they believe that's where we came from. I have a book which points this out, one of my biochemistry books. It says that indeed mutations cause disease, most are harmful, and each child that you have has about 100 new mutations compared to you. Your grandchildren, 100 more. And then it said, but some mutations must be beneficial because that's how evolution works. They didn't say what they were, but after reading that paragraph, and it's one of my favorite books to teach when I taught biochemistry at the college, but when I point that out, you can see that they know they're harmful. Yet why do they still accept evolution? I talked about this in the earlier group, and afterwards several people mentioned, yeah, I've said had the same conversations, but they say, I still believe in evolution. In spite of the evidence, overwhelming evidence, I still believe in evolution.